The pension fight is spreading, clearly. Ohio's Governor John Kasich says that his plan will pass. Listen to this.
We've also on the verge of passing a bill that will allow us to eliminate silly rules and regulations that get in the way of small business. So we have a major reform agenda, and we will also restructure a lot of the operations of government.
Now, there is a vote in Ohio on pension reform. It's expected today. Also part of that reform movement will be some restriction on collective bargaining by public service unions. With us now is Mark Mix from the National Right to Work Committee, live from Washington, D.C. Now, we know you, Mark, as someone who opposes unions, generally speaking. Am I right in saying that in Ohio there is an attempt, as there was in Wisconsin, to restrict collective bargaining by public service unions? Am I right in saying that that's part of the deal here?
Absolutely, Stuart. That is part of the deal. It's happening in Wisconsin, it's happening in Ohio, but it's important to understand what they're trying to do. And they're not eliminating bargaining rights, which I think would be an appropriate position to eliminate the privileges of a private organization, which is a labor union, to stand between taxpayers and their elected officials.
Okay, now, but I'm right in saying this is in progress in Ohio. My question to you is, the Democrats in Ohio have not fled the state as they did in Wisconsin. Therefore, I presume that this bill will pass in Ohio, and you've got a real breakthrough. You've got a real pushback against collective bargaining by some unions for the state, correct?
Well, I think that's right. It looks like the numbers aren't there for them to walk out and affect the functioning of the Ohio legislature, and so therefore they're going to stick around. There's been 22 hours of debate on this bill, hundreds of witnesses, or over 100 witnesses, and so it's been debated properly. It looks like it's going to be voted in committee today. I think the governor's indicated that he thinks the bill is going to pass and will pass the Senate, and then there will be some major progress made here.
I don't mean to spring this on you, but there's a report I received in the middle of last week suggesting that some Republicans in Michigan had drafted legislation which would make Michigan a right-to-work state. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there's actually right-to-work activity all over the country right now, Stuart. There's a bill that passed the House in New Hampshire, a bill that will pass in the Missouri legislature. There's a bill in Michigan that talks about creating right-to-work zones. There's also talk of introducing a right-to-work bill up there as well. So freedom's breaking out all over. You are in the vanguard of this, aren't you? You're winning, aren't you? Well, I won't say we're winning yet, but it's important that we have this debate about compulsory unionism. You know, since 1955, the National Right to Work Committee has been making the case that it's great and it's important to protect the rights to join unions. We shouldn't allow union officials to force workers to pay as a condition of employment. And the manifestation of that in the government sector, over 28 years in the making here in Ohio, is a problem that is beginning to be understood by taxpayers and politicians, and it's important we win these battles. Of course, there is a distinction between going to be a right-to-work state, which stops a closed shop, union house, essentially, and restrictions on collective bargaining by public sector unions. There's a difference between the two. That's correct, Stuart. A right-to-work law in Michigan wouldn't in any way hinder the collective bargaining rights of private sector workers. But there's a different story to be told in government. Even Franklin Roosevelt said that bargaining with the government, union bargaining with the government, was unthinkable and intolerable. George Meany, the president of the AFL-CIO, said you can't bargain with government. And he was right. And he's right back in 1955, and he's right today as governments look to try to close budget deficits that are destroying their states. But to sum it up, we haven't had the vote yet in Wisconsin because the Democrats have left the state. But in Ohio, we may well get a vote today which restricts collective bargaining by public sector unions. Is that correct? I think that's right. Okay. The plan is to vote it out of committee and then have it on the Senate floor just as quickly as possible. Okay. Thanks for bringing us up to date, Mark Mix. We appreciate you being with us, sir. Good stuff. Thank you, Stuart.